If you're hearing this, then my family already believes they've won." Those were the first words written on a yellowed envelope that changed my life forever. The strangest part wasn't that my grandmother had left me a letter. It was that she'd hidden it where no one in my family would ever think to look. Because by the time I found it, I'd already been cut out of her will, publicly humiliated by my own relatives, and told I wasn't really family anymore. What they didn't know was that Grandma had been planning for that exact moment. The day they celebrated my downfall was the day they unknowingly started their own. My name is Emily Carter, and until 2 years ago, I believed family meant standing beside each other when life got hard. I believed blood was stronger than money. I believed honesty eventually mattered. I was wrong about almost everything. My grandmother, Eleanor Carter, wasn't just the heart of our family. She was the reason we were a family at all. Every Thanksgiving was at her farmhouse. Every birthday somehow ended with one of her homemade pies. Every Christmas morning smelled like cinnamon, coffee, and fresh bread before the sun even came up. She had a way of making everyone feel important. Even when my father barely spoke to his younger brother, Grandma could get them laughing around the dinner table within 20 minutes. She called it temporary stupidity. "Families fight," she'd always say with a grin. "The smart ones remember their family before it's too late." I believed her, maybe because I was the only grandchild who actually spent time with her outside the holidays. Every Saturday morning, I'd drive 45 minutes to her farmhouse. We'd drink tea on the porch, tend her garden, fix broken fences, or simply sit in silence, watching the wind move through the fields. She never asked me to come. I never felt like I had to. Those Saturdays became the best part of my week. The rest of the family thought I was wasting my weekends. My cousin Rachel once laughed and said, "Seriously, Emily? You're spending your 20s planting tomatoes with Grandma?" I smiled. "She's more interesting than most people I know." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Whatever makes you happy." At the time, I thought she genuinely didn't understand. Now I know she understood perfectly. She just valued something else, money. My father, Richard, loved Grandma, but only from a distance. He visited when appearances required it. My Uncle David came whenever repairs were needed, or whenever he thought Grandma might mention changing her estate plans. My Aunt Linda called every Sunday, but somehow never had time to visit. Rachel only showed up when family photos were being taken. I never judged them. People get busy. Life happens. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Everything changed the afternoon Grandma collapsed in her garden. I'd been scheduled to visit the next morning, but something told me to stop by after work instead. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her watering can lying on its side. That wasn't like her. Grandma never left things unfinished. I walked around the house calling her name. Nothing. Then I saw her. She was lying beside the rose bushes, barely conscious. Her breathing was shallow. The garden gloves were still on her hands. I dropped to my knees. "Grandma! Grandma, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open just enough to recognize me. "Emily, I'm calling an ambulance." She squeezed my wrist with surprising strength. "I knew you'd come." Those 5 words stayed with me longer than anything else she ever said. At the hospital, the doctors explained she'd suffered a mild stroke. She was stable. But recovery would take time. When the rest of the family finally arrived, everyone suddenly became the picture of concern. Rachel cried dramatically in the hallway. Linda hugged every nurse she saw. Uncle David loudly asked whether Grandma had updated her insurance information. That question should have bothered me. Instead, I ignored it. For the next 6 months, I practically lived between my apartment, my job, and the rehabilitation center. I brought Grandma's books. I helped with physical therapy. I paid bills when she forgot. I drove her to appointments. When she finally returned home, I moved into the guest room for a while because she wasn't supposed to be alone. Nobody else offered. They all had reasons: busy schedules, business trips, school events, important meetings. Grandma never complained, neither did I. One rainy evening, while we watched old movies together, she suddenly muted the television. Emily, yeah? Can I ask you something? Anything. If one day everyone disappoints you. I laughed softly. That's an oddly specific question. She didn't smile. If everyone disappoints you, promise me you won't let bitterness become who you are. I stared at her. Where is this coming from? She looked toward the rain tapping against the windows. People change when they think something belongs to them. I frowned. What do you mean? She reached over and squeezed my hand. You'll understand later. I wanted to ask more. Instead, she turned the television volume back up. That conversation haunted me for months. At the time, I assumed she was reflecting on getting older. I had no idea she'd already seen the cracks spreading through our family. Then came the phone calls, one after another. David suddenly wanted to check in. Linda started bringing flowers every weekend. Rachel began posting selfies with Grandma online captioned, "Making memories while we still can." Grandma smiled politely through all of it, but when they left, she'd sigh. They're nervous. Nervous about what? She simply changed the subject. Looking back, she wasn't avoiding the answer. She was protecting me. The following spring, Grandma's health declined much faster than anyone expected. The doctors couldn't explain why. She grew weaker every week. One afternoon, she asked me to wheel her into the old barn. It hadn't been used in years. Dust floated through beams of sunlight breaking between wooden boards. She pointed toward an ancient workbench. Third drawer. Inside were faded photographs, old receipts, and a tiny brass key. She picked up the key herself. This opens something important. What does it open? You'll know when it's time. I laughed. That's mysterious. She smiled for the first time all week. Life would be boring if I explained everything. At least tell me where to look. No, Grandma. If I tell you now, you'll never understand why I waited. She slipped the key into my palm and gently closed my fingers around it. Promise me you'll keep this safe. I promise. That tiny brass key stayed in my desk drawer for almost a year. I almost forgot about it. Almost 3 months later, Grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was beautiful. Hundreds of people came, neighbors, former students, church friends, people I'd never even met. Every single one had a story about how she'd quietly helped them through the hardest moments of their lives. Listening to them made me realize something. The richest thing Grandma ever owned wasn't her farmhouse. It wasn't her savings. It wasn't the land. It was the lives she'd changed. I thought that was what everyone else had come to honor. I couldn't have been more wrong, because less than 48 hours after we buried her, my Uncle David called the entire family together. The attorney wants everyone present for the reading of the will. His voice sounded almost excited. I ignored the feeling in my stomach. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, we had just lost the woman who held our family together. Surely no one was thinking about money yet. I had no idea I was walking into the biggest betrayal of my life. The attorney's office was quieter than a church. No one spoke as we took our seats around the polished oak conference table. The air smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, but beneath it was something heavier. Anticipation. I noticed Rachel scrolling through real estate listings on her phone before the meeting had even started. Uncle David leaned back with the confidence of someone who already knew the outcome. My father sat beside me, avoiding eye contact. The attorney, Mr. Harrison, adjusted his glasses and folded his hands together. First, he said softly, I'd like to offer my condolences. Eleanor Carter was one of the finest women I've ever had the privilege of knowing. No one responded. He opened a thick folder. As instructed by Mrs. Carter, I'll now read her last will and testament. The room became completely still. Grandma's jewelry collection was divided between Linda and Rachel. Her antique furniture went to my father. The vintage pickup truck Uncle David had always admired was left to him. Several charitable donations were listed. Then came the farmhouse. My residence, surrounding acreage, and associated structures shall pass equally to my sons, Richard and David. David smiled before the sentence was even finished. Rachel squeezed her mother's hand. I felt nothing. The house had never mattered to me. It was Grandma herself that I missed. The attorney continued. My investment portfolio shall be divided among my surviving children. Again, my name wasn't mentioned. That was fine. I hadn't expected anything. Then he reached the final page. My granddaughter Emily Carter, every eye turned toward me, shall receive the sum of $1. Silence. For a second, I wondered if I'd heard him wrong. $1. Rachel let out a tiny laugh before pretending to cough. David cleared his throat to hide his grin. Linda looked almost embarrassed. Even my father slowly turned toward me, with an expression I couldn't read. Mr. Harrison looked uncomfortable. As requested by Mrs. Carter, the amount is specifically $1. Rachel couldn't hold it anymore. Oh my God! She burst into laughter. I'm sorry. I'm really trying not to laugh. She wasn't trying. Not even a little. David shook his head dramatically. I guess Eleanor wanted to make a point. Linda whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Maybe she realized Emily was spending time with her hoping for an inheritance. The words hit harder than I expected, because they weren't just insulting me. They were rewriting years of love into something selfish. I stared at the table. My throat tightened. Was that really what everyone believed? That every Saturday, every hospital visit, every hour spent helping Grandma had been some kind of investment? My father finally spoke. Emily, maybe she had her reasons. I slowly looked at him. You think I deserved $1? He hesitated. I don't know. That hurt more than anything Rachel had said. The attorney carefully slid an envelope across the table. The dollar is enclosed, as instructed. Rachel laughed again. I've never seen someone disinherited so literally. David smiled. At least she got something. I picked up the envelope. It felt strangely heavy. For a single dollar, it shouldn't have. Before I could open it, David stood. Well, I suppose we should discuss selling the farmhouse. I looked up. Selling it? Rachel nodded enthusiastically. It's worth almost $2 million now. Linda smiled. We've already talked to an agent. Already. Grandma hadn't even been buried for 3 days. You've already planned this? David shrugged. There's no reason to keep it. No reason? It's just an old house. Just an old house. The place where Grandma taught me how to bake, where she'd read bedtime stories when Mom died, where she'd patched scraped knees, where she'd comforted every broken heart in this family. Just an old house. Something inside me cracked. Without saying another word, I stood and walked out. No one followed, not one person. Outside, I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes before finally opening the envelope. Inside was a crisp $1 bill. Nothing else. No letter, no explanation. Just $1. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it hurt too much to cry. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe Grandma had changed her mind about me. Maybe I'd imagined how close we'd been. Maybe... The thought made me physically sick. That evening, my phone buzzed nonstop. Rachel had already posted on social media. Family meeting today. Grateful Grandma made fair decisions. The comments came quickly. So sorry for Eckley. So sorry for your loss. Family is everything. What a beautiful legacy. No one knew the truth. No one knew she was celebrating while Grandma's flowers were still fresh on the grave. I muted my phone. Around midnight, there was a knock at my apartment door. It was my father. He looked exhausted. I thought we should talk. I stepped aside. He walked in silently. After several minutes, he finally spoke. Don't fight the will. I stared at him. I wasn't planning to... Good. Is that why you're here? He sighed. I don't want this turning into a family dispute. I almost laughed. A dispute? Dad. They laughed at me. They were emotional. No, they were relieved. He looked away. You don't understand, then explain. He rubbed his forehead. Your grandmother changed that will 6 months ago. My heart skipped. What? I wasn't supposed to tell you. Changed it? He nodded slowly. She called us all in. What happened? I don't know. You were there. She met with the attorney privately. He stood. Emily, what? Just let it go. Then he left. Those 4 words echoed in my apartment long after the door closed. She changed it 6 months ago. 6 months. That was around the time she'd given me the brass key. The key? I froze. I hadn't thought about it since the funeral. I rushed to my desk and emptied the top drawer, receipts, old notebooks, a flashlight. Then, there it was. The tiny brass key rested exactly where she'd placed it in my hand. Suddenly, I heard her voice as clearly as if she were standing beside me. If I tell you now, you'll never understand why I waited. My pulse quickened. What did this key open? Why had she trusted only me with it? The next morning, I drove to the farmhouse. A moving truck was already parked outside. Workers were measuring windows. David wasn't wasting any time. He spotted me walking toward the porch. What are you doing here? I just wanted one last look. He folded his arms. You've had your chance. My chance? The will's been read. I know. So there's nothing here for you. His words felt rehearsed, like he'd been waiting to say them. I ignored him and walked past. You can't just go wandering around. I practically lived here while Grandma recovered. Not anymore. I stopped. For the first time in my life, the farmhouse didn't feel like home. Every room echoed with memories. Grandma humming while she cooked, her old rocking chair, the smell of lavender. I wandered into the kitchen. Everything looked exactly the same, except one photograph was missing. It had always hung above the fireplace, a picture of Grandma holding my hand on my first day of kindergarten. I frowned. Who would remove only that photograph? I searched the living room. Nothing. Then I noticed faint square marks on the wallpaper where it had hung for years. Someone had taken it very recently. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. This wasn't random. Someone had been looking for something. Maybe they already knew there were secrets hidden inside the house. Outside, David called impatiently. You done? I nodded. As I stepped onto the porch, my eyes drifted toward the old barn, where Grandma had handed me the brass key, where she'd smiled and said I'd know when the time was right. Maybe the time had finally come. I stood frozen on the porch, staring at the old red barn, while David impatiently jingled the keys in his pocket. You leaving or what? He snapped. I nodded without answering and walked toward my car. The moment I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced into the rearview mirror. David wasn't watching the moving crew anymore. He was watching me. That alone told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't worried about the house. He was worried about what I might know. Instead of driving home, I parked a mile down the road beside an abandoned fruit stand. I waited. 20 minutes later, David's black SUV left the farmhouse. 5 minutes after that, Rachel's car followed. The moving truck stayed, but the workers had gone inside for lunch. I looked at the brass key lying on the passenger seat. Okay, Grandma, I whispered. Let's find out what you wanted me to see. I slipped through the side entrance of the property, keeping out of sight behind the overgrown hedges. My heart pounded so loudly I was convinced someone would hear it. The barn door groaned as I pulled it open just enough to squeeze inside. Nothing had changed. The same dusty shelves, the same old tractor, the same workbench where Grandma had smiled at me months earlier. I pulled open the third drawer. It was empty. Every photograph, every receipt. Everything was gone. Someone had cleaned it out. A wave of panic rushed over me. I was too late. I searched every shelf, every cabinet, every box of rusty nails, but there was nothing unusual. Then I remembered something Grandma used to say whenever I couldn't find my gardening gloves. If something disappears, stop looking where everyone else looks. I closed my eyes. She wasn't talking about the drawer. She was talking about the room. I slowly turned around. What was the one place no one would think to search? My eyes settled on an old grandfather clock leaning against the far wall. It had been broken for as long as I could remember. Grandma refused to throw it away. Some things deserve patience, she'd always say. I walked over and examined it. The keyhole looked familiar. My hands trembled as I pulled the brass key from my pocket. It fit perfectly. I turned it. Click, a hidden panel quietly released beneath the clock face. My breath caught. Inside rested a small wooden box wrapped in faded blue cloth. No dust. Grandma had placed it there herself. I carefully lifted it out and opened the lid. On top lay a single envelope. In Grandma's unmistakable handwriting were the words, "For Emily, and only when they believe you've lost everything." My eyes immediately filled with tears. She knew, she had known this would happen. I unfolded the letter with shaking hands. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then my greatest fear has come true. The people I spent my life trying to keep together have finally allowed greed to become louder than love. First, I need you to know something. You did nothing wrong. If they made you feel unwanted, if they accused you of helping me for money, if they laughed while your heart broke, none of that was true. I saw every visit, every meal you cooked, every late-night drive to the hospital, every tear you thought I didn't notice. You never came because of what I owned. You came because of who I was. That is why you are the only person I trust. I had to stop reading. The tears blurred every word. For weeks I'd questioned everything. For weeks I'd wondered whether I'd somehow imagined our relationship. One page erased every doubt. I continued. I intentionally left you $1. I know that decision probably hurt you more than anything I've ever done. Please forgive me. I needed everyone else to believe they had won. Greed makes people careless. Only when they think they've taken everything will they stop looking. I stared at the page. She had planned this, every bit of it. Beneath the letter rested another envelope. Inside were copies of bank statements, property surveys, handwritten notes, and a small USB drive taped to the back. The final page read, "The attorney handling my will has never seen these documents. Neither has anyone in our family. Because I wasn't protecting my money. I was protecting the truth." My pulse quickened. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop the moment I got back to my apartment, the screen filled with neatly labeled folders. Home security, financial records, medical notes, personal videos. I clicked on the first video. Grandma appeared sitting at her kitchen table, smiling gently into the camera. "If you're watching this, sweetheart, then I'm no longer with you." I broke down all over again, she continued. "I've kept security cameras around the farmhouse for years. Most people think they're broken because I never told anyone they still work. Security cameras." She smiled knowingly. "Some people reveal their true character only when they believe no one is watching." The next folder contained dozens of video clips. Rachel stealing jewelry from Grandma's bedroom while pretending to organize family photos. David opening filing cabinets and photographing legal documents. Linda searching desk drawers when she thought Grandma was asleep. Each clip had a date and timestamp. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But then I opened the final recording. It had been made only 8 days before Grandma died. David stood in the living room speaking in a low voice to Rachel. "Once Mom signs the new papers, we'll convince her to sell the land." Rachel frowned. "And Emily?" David laughed. "Emily's too sentimental. She'll never see it coming." Rachel smirked. "Good, she deserves nothing anyway." The video ended. I sat there in complete silence. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was proof. Proof that Grandma had seen everything. Proof that she'd been betrayed long before she passed away. And somehow, she had trusted me to finish what she no longer could. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard David laughing. Emily's too sentimental. She'll never see it coming. Maybe he was right. I had been sentimental. I believed love was enough to keep a family together. Grandma hadn't. She loved us more than anyone, but she'd also prepared for the day greed finally outweighed decency. By sunrise, I'd watched every single file on the USB drive. There were dozens of recordings spanning almost 2 years. Some were harmless. Grandma talking to birds on the porch, showing me how her tomato plants were growing, laughing at squirrels stealing pecans from the backyard. Others made my stomach turn. David had visited far more often than I'd realized, not to spend time with her, to search. He waited until Grandma fell asleep in her recliner before quietly opening drawers, checking filing cabinets, and even looking beneath loose floorboards. Rachel was no different. One video showed her pretending to help organize family photographs. The moment Grandma stepped outside to answer a phone call, Rachel opened Grandma's jewelry box, took pictures of several pieces, then texted someone. A few minutes later, her phone screen lit up. Those earrings alone should be worth at least 15 grand. I leaned back in my chair. They weren't grieving. They'd been preparing. The final folder was labeled simply, "If they go too far." There was only one document inside, a scanned envelope addressed to Mr. Harrison. The attorney attached was a handwritten note from Grandma, "Emily, if you ever feel forced to defend yourself, give him this unopened envelope. Don't read it first. Trust me one last time." I stared at it for several minutes. Every instinct told me to open it. Every memory of Grandma told me not to. I printed the scan, slipped it into a new envelope, and called Mr. Harrison's office as soon as it opened. His receptionist sounded surprised. "Mr. Harrison can see you this afternoon. I'll be there." Before I left, my phone buzzed for Rachel. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. "What?" Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. "We're having one last family dinner at the farmhouse tonight before listing it. I wasn't invited." She laughed softly. "No, but I thought you should know." "Why?" "So you don't drive out there expecting it to still be Grandma's house." She paused just long enough to twist the knife. "It's ours, now." The line went dead. I looked at the phone for a long moment. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel hurt. I felt calm. Grandma had anticipated every move they'd make. Maybe it was time I stopped reacting and started following her plan. That afternoon, Mr. Harrison greeted me with a tired smile. "I'm glad you came. I found something Grandma left for me." His expression immediately changed. "What kind of something?" Without saying a word, I placed the sealed envelope on his desk. He recognized the handwriting instantly. "Eleanor." He carefully broke the seal. As he read, the color slowly drained from his face. He reached the second page. Then the third. By the fourth, he removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead. "What is it?" I asked quietly. He looked up at me with genuine disbelief. "When was this given to you?" "I found it yesterday." He took a long breath. "Emily, your grandmother instructed me that if this envelope ever appeared, I was to immediately suspend every action related to the estate." I blinked. "What?" "The sale. The property transfers. Everything." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "She had the legal authority to do that?" He nodded slowly. "Only under one condition." "What condition?" He folded the letter shut. "If credible evidence existed that one or more beneficiaries obtained their inheritance through fraud, coercion, or deliberate concealment." My heart began pounding. I reached into my bag and placed the USB drive on his desk. "I think Grandma expected me to bring this too." He stared at it. "What is it?" "Evidence." For the next hour, neither of us spoke much. We simply watched video after video, date after date, David searching through legal files, Rachel discussing jewelry values, Linda removing paperwork from a locked cabinet. Finally, the recording of David saying, "1. Say, Cheryl. Once Mom signs the new papers." Mr. Harrison paused the video. His jaw tightened. "I remember, that week. What do you mean?" Eleanor canceled an appointment with me. Why? She said she'd discovered something that made her reconsider everyone she trusted. He looked directly at me. I didn't know what she meant. Now I do. He stood and walked to the window. When he finally turned back around, his voice had changed. This estate is no longer a routine probate matter. What happens now? I'm filing an emergency petition with the court. And my family? They're going to have some very uncomfortable questions to answer. For the first time since Grandma died, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. As I walked out of the office, my phone buzzed again. This time it was David. I answered. What do you want? His tone was sharp. Were you at Harrison's office? I stopped walking. Why do you ask? Because he just called and canceled tomorrow's property closing. A slow smile spread across my face. I guess something came up. His voice hardened. What did you do, Emily? I looked up at the afternoon sky and thought about Grandma sitting on her porch, smiling as the wind moved through her garden. Then I answered with complete honesty. I didn't do anything. I just found the truth. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. Then, for the first time in my life, I heard fear in my uncle's voice. What truth? David never answered his own question. The call ended, and for the first time since Grandma's funeral, the silence belonged to him instead of me. Within 48 hours, Mr. Harrison filed an emergency petition to freeze the estate. The sale of the farmhouse was halted, the property transfers were suspended, and every beneficiary was ordered not to sell, move, or dispose of any inherited assets until the court reviewed the evidence. My family was furious. Rachel accused me of fabricating everything. Linda claimed the recordings were taken out of context. David insisted Grandma's cameras had invaded everyone's privacies. No one denied that the videos were real. They only argued that they shouldn't be seen. When the hearing finally arrived, the courtroom was packed. The judge carefully reviewed the footage, Grandma's handwritten letters, and the financial records she had secretly preserved. Then Mr. Harrison revealed one final surprise. Months before her death, Grandma had signed a sworn affidavit stating that if evidence ever surfaced, proving anyone had manipulated her, searched for legal documents without permission, or attempted to pressure her into changing her estate plan, she wanted the court to investigate whether those beneficiaries had violated their fiduciary duties and whether they should inherit anything at all. The room fell silent. David's confidence disappeared. Rachel stared at the table. Linda quietly began to cry. Then Mr. Harrison played Grandma's final video. She looked older than I remembered, but her smile was steady. If you're watching this, then the truth finally matters more than appearances. She paused, as if speaking directly to each of us. I spent my whole life believing a family could survive almost anything. I was wrong. A family cannot survive greed unless someone is willing to stand for what is right. Her eyes filled with tears. Emily, if you're here, thank you. Not for protecting my estate, but for protecting my name. I never wanted revenge. I wanted honesty. She smiled one last time. The greatest inheritance I could ever leave isn't land or money. It's the courage to do the right thing when everyone else chooses the easy path. The courtroom remained silent long after the screen went black. Several weeks later, the judge issued the final ruling. Because of the evidence of manipulation, attempted concealment, and breaches of trust, the estate was sent back for review. Assets connected to the misconduct were redistributed according to Grandma's documented intentions and applicable law. The farmhouse was not sold. Instead, it was placed into a charitable family trust, exactly as Grandma had described in documents no one else knew existed. The trust would provide scholarships for local students, support the community garden she loved, and preserve the farmhouse as a place where families could gather, not fight over money. As for me, I wasn't made wealthy overnight. But I became the trustee responsible for carrying out Grandma's wishes. That responsibility meant far more than any inheritance. David resigned from his business after news of the court's findings damaged his reputation. Rachel quietly disappeared from social media, deleting years of carefully crafted posts. Linda eventually wrote me a handwritten letter. It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a request for money. It simply said, "I forgot what your grandmother was trying to teach us. I'm sorry." Months later, I walked through Grandma's garden for the first time since everything had ended. The roses had bloomed again. The porch swing still creaked in the afternoon breeze. For a moment, I could almost hear her laughter. I sat in her favorite rocking chair and unfolded the very first letter she had left me. I read the final sentence one more time. "People will always remember what you chose when money and love stood on opposite sides of the room." I finally understood. My family thought Grandma's greatest treasure was hidden in a bank account. They spent months chasing deeds, wills, jewelry, and property. But the real inheritance had never been locked inside a safe. It had been hidden inside her character. And, unlike money, that was something no one could steal. I folded the letter, looked across the fields she had loved for so many years, and smiled through my tears. In the end, my family won the will. I inherited Grandma's legacy. Looking back now, I know she planned every step with remarkable wisdom. She didn't leave me $1 because she valued me the least. She left me $1 because she knew the truth would eventually be worth far more than everything else she owned, and she was right.